Aloha and welcome back. This is a big one. We got Hakeem Jeffries on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Let's see what they're talking about.
Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. My guest represents the 8th Congressional District of the great state of New York and is serving his 7th term in the United States Congress. I'm honored he's taken time out of his very busy schedule to come on this show. Please welcome Democratic House Minority Leader, the one and only Hakeem Jeffries. Good afternoon, sir. How are you? How's everything?
Good afternoon. Great to be with you.
Listen, first of all, I'm in a bad mood. I'll tell you why. We'll get to it later. My Knicks, I had to watch them this week, and I'm very upset about that. The Yankees, they're having press conferences over facial hair. I'm very upset about that. There's a lot about New York sports that's getting on my nerves right now. We'll get to all of that stuff later because I know that's something that you want to talk about as well, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it. But the first question for me, obviously with so much going on in the nation's capital right now, how do you feel about where things are specifically overall and just as important with the Democratic Party at this moment in time?
Well, this is a tough moment for the country. What we've seen over the last several weeks is a flood of extremism unleashed on the country coming out of the White House and from the Trump administration. In many ways, the parade of horribles is really designed to try to disorient and discourage and depress people. And we're going to have to show a level of resilience to get the country through this very tough moment. That's exactly what we as House Democrats, partnering with Senate Democrats, partnering with governors and attorney generals all across the country need to do. The American people want us to solve problems on their.
He was the one talking about how weak they are and how little power they have. It's kind of funny coming from him. And now his voice is he's very like calm, and he almost sounds kind of scared. Like I don't know. He has a very weak voice. He sounds very timid, scared to me.
We have, particularly the core challenge of unaffordability in the United States of America. The cost of living is too high. The American people clearly in November
indicated, okay, so if the cost of living is too high, it was already too high. Why didn't you do something when you had a Democratic president when you could get stuff done? If all you're going to do is fight when the Republicans are in, but then when the Democrats are in, you're not going to do nothing, that doesn't help anybody.
Indicated that they want us to do something about it. We're prepared as House Democrats to address that issue, to lower housing costs, lower child care costs.
They're prepared now while we don't have the presidency and Trump is on some other stuff, right? When we had the presidency and we were saying milk was too high, eggs were too high, housing is too high, everything is too high, why didn't you do something when you had the power to do something that you could actually get something done?
Lower grocery costs, lower insurance costs, and lower utility costs. Unfortunately, President Trump has been more of a chaos agent over the last few weeks and not shown.
Right, so when we had Sleepy Joe on chaos, why didn't you do something then? See, that's how they do. When the Democrats are in, everybody just gets calm and silent, nothing happens. Then when the Republicans are in, everybody's all in the uproar acting like it's something way different and we're going to lose this or that or whatever. The Democrats don't do nothing when they have the chance to do something.
Any interest whatsoever in dealing with the unaffordability that many everyday Americans are confronting.
Right, like when you had Joe Biden in office.
When you call him a chaos agent, be specific about what you think he is doing that's creating chaos. I want to know from one of the leading voices in the Democratic Party, when you utter the word chaos, be specific about exactly what you believe he's doing to cause chaos.
Well, we've seen more than 40 or so different executive orders that have been issued as it relates to things that are clearly either unlawful or unconstitutional.
Which things?
Designed to be disruptive. You have hardworking federal employees who are being targeted in ways that is creating a lot of trauma for them, their children, and for their families.
In ways, but he's not being specific.
We've seen statements made by President Trump related to President Zelensky, who's not a dictator. He's actually a champion for democracy, for freedom, and for truth.
Well, he did stop their elections. I'm not going to say he's a dictator, and I don't really care about that situation all too much, but he did withhold elections or whatever you call blocking the elections because they're in war or whatever.
Instead, you see the Trump administration playing footsie with Vladimir Putin and Russia. They're sworn enemies of the United States.
And why are they sworn enemies of the United States? They shouldn't be sworn enemies of us. There should be no sworn enemies on the planet. Like, we're all human beings. We need to get along. We need to coalesce, and hopefully we can get to that Star Trek future sooner than later. But I mean, why with one of the biggest countries in the world that has, what do you call it, atomic power, nuclear power, why do you want to be sworn enemies with them?
Of America, that is actually not helpful to our national security. It's chaotic. And what we've seen in connection with all of these unlawful and unconstitutional executive orders is lawsuit after lawsuit filed, actually more than 75 at this particular point in time, against these unlawful and unconstitutional executive orders. And the courts are siding with America and the Constitution over and over and over again, not the Trump administration. So instead of advancing legislation designed to actually solve problems, I think it's fair to say what we've seen is chaos being unleashed on the American people.
What about those out there who would say the Democrats have contributed to the chaos? Because you had President Joe Biden in office over the previous 4 years with Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee, as his VP. Obviously, there were things that were going on over the last 4 years when we talk about inflation, when we talk about the borders and how open borders obviously was something that was problematic for this nation. So many of those things contributed to the demise, or dare I say, the chaos that you're alluding to now. People would look in the face of the Democratic Party and say, what about you guys? You guys had everything to do with this. How do you answer that?
Well, sir.
So that's basically what I was saying. When the Democrats are in and have the chance, they don't say anything. They don't do nothing. They just kind of sit down and chill. When they don't have any power, like he said, when the Republicans got the presidency or got the more power, then they're going to all yell and try to say stuff because they can't get nothing done. But let this man answer.
So many of those things contributed to the demise, or dare I say, the chaos that you're alluding to now. People would look in the face of the Democratic Party and say, what about you guys? You guys had everything to do with this. How do you answer that?
Well, certainly I think Joe Biden and his administration was anything but chaotic. They dealt with a lot of different challenges that he had to confront upon taking office. In fact, if you look back on it, in January of 2021, President Biden inherited both a public health crisis around COVID-19, an economic crisis connected to the shutdown of the economy, a democracy crisis related to the violent attack.
It is funny, the Republicans always hand the Democrats some kind of crisis, like he said, COVID to Biden, the 2008 crash Bush had, then he handed that to Obama, and who was before that? Oh, Clinton and the Bush before that, right? They had the Iraq War, right? The first Iraq War. I forget exactly, but he handed them not the best economy either.
On the Capitol that had occurred on January 6th, and then shortly thereafter, an international crisis related to Russia's unprecedented, brutal attack on the people of Ukraine.
Unprecedented, brutal attack. How is it unprecedented? We attacked Iraq. We attacked Afghanistan. We got Israel attacking Palestine. That's the most unprecedented, I would say. They just straight wiped them out. But like, we attacked Vietnam, Korea. How is that unprecedented? We attack people all the time. We are a warrior state.
So he was trying to manage a lot, doing the best job that he could over that particular period of time. Now, there's certainly, it is certainly the case that there are issues that the American people are asking us to decisively tackle that we need to figure out a way to do. Common ground.
Yeah, he just has like a kind of cracky voice to me where he kind of seems kind of scared a little bit. Like he's not like stepping up and like being proud-chested. He seems like he's worried or whatever.
Where possible around driving down the high cost of living. And as you mentioned, Stephen A., as it relates to the border, look, we have to secure the border.
Now.
Period, full stop. We have a broken immigration system, and it needs to be fixed. And we should do it in a bipartisan and a comprehensive way. So there's some permanence to the resolution. But at the same period of time, we have to protect dreamers, protect farm workers, and protect families, people who are contributing to the American way of life in community after community after community. And lastly, I'd say that we can all agree that we have to keep our communities safe. And certainly some of the actions that we've seen, you referenced my concern with the chaos, it's chaotic to pardon more than 1,500 violent criminals, many of whom attacked
See, that's
police
specific.
officers on January 6th and brutally beat them, and then unleash those folks into the community to go back home and at least threaten some with harm. That's problematic. That doesn't make America safer. It actually undermines public safety.
So many Republicans, and I'm sure you've seen me on a political circuit talking a little bit. Let me state right here with you on the record. I am no politician. I have no desire to be a politician. I'm not on the level of Hakeem Jeffries. I'm not on the level of Josh Shapiro, who I've interviewed. I'm not on the level of a Westmore. It'll be a snowball's chance in hell that I ever get to that point, for crying out loud. I've actually called it pathetic that I'm a candidate in people's eyes for the presidency because I'm not qualified. But I feel the frustration of the American people when they're talking about the state of affairs that exist in this country and the role both parties have played in it.
Those frustrated American people get into politics. Don't ask Stephen A. Smith to run for president. You get in, run for Senate. You run for president. Come to the Green Party, run for something.
So I would ask you right now, speaking specifically about the Democratic Party, how do you feel about where the Democratic Party is right now in the eyes of the American people, particularly when the latest polls, I think it's Quinnipiac polls, showed that congressional favor in terms of representatives in Congress from the Democratic Party is like at 20%, if I remember correctly. The Republicans are at 40%, for crying out loud. You guys are at 20%. How concerned are you about the Democratic Party? How are you feeling about where the Democratic
Nobody likes either party. Like, how is it so hard to start a third party? Nobody likes these guys. Just stop going to them. Everybody, just stop. If you're a Democrat, go green. If you're a Republican, go green or Libertarian. Let's fill up the parties that actually care about people.
Party is right now in the eyes of the American people?
Well, first of all, when it comes to the presidential aspirations that are being ascribed to you, certainly you're doing all right in the polls, and that's a testament to how you keep it real and connect with the American people. That said,
keeping it real.
In terms of where the congressional Democrats are at, listen, polls are all over the place. You're correct in what you just mentioned as it relates to one particular poll. There was a Washington Post poll that just came out earlier today, and it asked the American people, who would you prefer is in charge in the next Congress? House Democrats to serve as a check and balance on Donald Trump, or House Republicans who, are going to continue to just go along to get along. And by 13 points, the American people said House Democrats. I think it was 54 to 41. Mm-hmm. We clearly have work to do.
Poll the American people, put the Green Party and Libertarian Party in that poll. I bet it switches a little bit, but start educating people on getting. If the Green Party and Libertarian Party had as much publicity as the Democrats and Republicans, the Democrats and Republicans would stand no chance.
But I also think that the American people are increasingly starting to recognize that in this country that we have, you need common sense public servants who are willing to try to solve problems to make life better for hard-working American families. And that's our commitment. And we're going to have to do a better job of convincing the American people that is what drives us to make life better.
Common sense, like universal health care. Everybody wants that. Is that not common? Is that not sensical? The Democrats won't do that. Joe Biden said he would have vetoed it if it got on his desk. It's crazy, man. These guys are just nuts. They don't do nothing, and they act like
every American.
Whenever they can't do something, they act like they're gonna do something so much. If you just give them another chance. Give them another chance, they're not going to do nothing. I can guarantee it.
Community in every corner of the country.
Well, what's the impediment to the Democratic Party doing a better job? Let's speak specifically about that.
Nice. He's asking them some good questions, though. He is kind of surprising me with his questions, though. He's like asking what I'm asking right after.
Because you're the House Minority Leader. You're one of the top 2 Democrats in the country. And I'm looking at the party and I'm seeing these protests for DEI and other things. And I got to tell you something right now. I didn't have an issue with the protests. I had an issue with the behavior that I saw during the protests. People screaming expletives at the president, at Republican officials, etc. I'm saying they sound like they're on a campaign, sir. They're sounding like the same way they sounded during the campaign, and clearly the election showed that's not going to work. Why are they continuously doing it? It's not only getting in the way of the party itself, I think it's getting in the way of somebody like you doing the best job that you could possibly do, having to deal with this nonsense.
The guy that said he couldn't do nothing, the guy that said there was no job to be done, that the Republicans have all the power, we can't do anything. Are you serious? That's crazy.
How do you feel about that, and what do you say about it?
Well, I think if we can take a step back as it relates to what the fundamental challenge is in America for people all across the country, people, whether you're on the left, in the center, or on the right, all points in between.
Okay.
The system is broken. For far too long, right, we've seen everyday Americans unable to get ahead, and many can barely get by.
But basically, the system is working how it was set up. The system was meant to be like this, to keep money in the hands of the rich and the powerful, and to keep it a slim minority of people.
This was exacerbated, of course, by inflation and the high cost of living, but that's not a phenomenon just from the last year or two. That's been the case for decades. We've seen our jobs go in the wrong direction. We've seen the ability for people to provide a comfortable living for themselves and for their families be eroded. What we've seen, of course, are Americans who no longer believe, in many instances, that their children or grandchildren will be able to do better than them. When you and I were coming up, that was basically a core principle of the American dream. We had to struggle, had to work hard, but there was that sense that that opportunity would be available for all of us. Mm-hmm. And that's gone in many instances. And so as a result, you see frustration, you see concern, you see anger from people all across.
So like you said, this has been like this for decades. A long, long time. These guys have been in control. The Republicans and Democrats, going back and forth, doing their little dance. It's been like this for decades, and it will continue to be like this unless we do something different as a people. It is really up to us as a people. It's not up to the Democrats. It's not up to the Republicans, because they can't do anything. They're corporate owned. They can only work for the corporation, the 1% to 10%, whatever it is, the very tip top, whatever. If it's going to work for the bottom 80% of people, we got to stand up. We got to make our voice heard by going to a people-powered party, starting your own party, going to DSA. But we need to coalesce. We need to coalition. We need to come together. So the Green Party is the biggest left-wing party. If you're in the DSA, just call the Green Party. Let's get them together. Green, DSA, GSA. I don't even care. Like, the label, the brand doesn't matter. But we need to get in one big party and fight these guys. They're going to win always unless we come together. The corporations got the money to keep a Hakeem Jeffries, to keep whoever, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. Like Trump said, he was the first person to donate to Chuck Schumer. Joe Biden, when he was young, said that the big people wouldn't give him any money. Told him that he had to be in Congress for another 10 years or whatever before he could become a prostitute. He said he tried to whore himself out or whatever. So they'll tell you, listen to what he's saying. It's been like this for a long time. They've been in power for a long time, the two parties going back and forth, and it's like this. And it's always going to be like this unless you change it.
Across the land. That's one of the reasons why, Stephen A., I think that the political pendulum continues to swing. You go from George H.W. Bush to Bill Clinton to George W. Bush.
That is not a swing. George Bush to the crime bill. Like, okay, you went to the warmonger, to the guy who put the crime bill on us, to the other warmonger. So one goes to war in Iraq, the other goes to war in the U.S., then the other guy goes back to war in Iraq and Afghanistan now. That is not a big swing of the pendulum.
Bush to Barack Obama.
Barack Obama, not a big, the drone king and deporter in chief. There's not a swing. It's a swing in vernacular. It's a swing in verbiage and words. It's not a swing in what they actually do.
Barack Obama to Trump.
Trump, not that big a difference than Obama. He's way more boisterous and whatever. They're not that different. Tax cuts for everybody. We all lose our houses. We don't get any money. We don't get anything. The rich get richer. The poor get poorer. Meet the new boss. Same as the old boss. That's why they say these things. They act like it's different. They do their WWE dance, but they're not different.
To Biden back to Trump. And the
Biden, the crime bill, the writer of the crime bill, Biden has said out loud that he does not care about regular people and that he cares about his family more. He said it. He said it in Congress. He said it in interviews, and he's even proved it. He's putting black families and not families, black men in jail all kinds of ways and broken up all kinds of black families, and did not care and said he didn't care. But then he said, "Oh, we should care about my son, who's doing the exact same thing that these black dudes did that I put in jail for 5, 10, 15 years, but I'm going to pardon my son." And he had like 5, 10, 15 times the amount of crack that these dudes had.
likelihood is it may swing again in 2028. Why?
If you want it to swing, go green. Like, blue or red is not a swing. It's the same thing.
Why? Because there's an underlying frustration with Washington's core inability to make life better for everyday Americans, to bring the American dream to life.
Because they don't care to. They don't want to. They could very easily, if they wanted to. Barack Obama could have passed universal health care. Barack Obama could have done anything. He had the will of the people. He had Congress and the House of Representatives. Everybody in America was behind Barack Obama just about, except for the Republicans in Congress, and they couldn't have done nothing. If he would have tried to pass a bill, well, obviously he would have passed it because Congress and House was all Democrats, but if they would have tried to stop him, we would have went out in the streets if he'd have access to, like he had that power. But they're not going to do anything. If we give them the power again, they're just going to throw it away. Bernie Sanders got these rallies going on. If he goes back to the Democratic Party and gives him that movement, or gives them that movement again, they're just going to tell you to go away and not use that power and not help you out. If you want that power to be used to help you out, the regular person, take that power to the Green Party.
Jeffrey, I just have to ask, how could you possibly pull that off if both sides of the aisle refuse to get things done, to compromise to some degree? I've said this often. You could go on a campaign trail. That's where the real work is. I certainly don't mean to diminish what you're doing. Please don't get it wrong. I'm saying, literally, if I'm a Democrat, once I'm elected, well, what did the other side do? I'm going to do the opposite. I'm a Republican. Well, what did the other side do? I'm going to do the opposite. That's the impression that the American people have received.
And that is kind of pretty much what they do, because, like, the Democrats will even try to pass Republican bills. Like, they tried to do something about immigration, like probably about a year ago when it was way too late. But the Republicans shut it down. They didn't want to be bipartisan. But they're doing the same thing. Like, so if it was the Green Party, we would just go. I don't care what the Democrats or Republicans are doing or want. What do the people want? And we know we want universal health care, so that'd be one of the first things. We know we want some kind of border policies, right? So then we talk to the people. What kind of border policies do we want? How many people do we want to let in? How do we want to let them in? Things like that. Make a policy on that. Education stuff. State free college. What is it? The pre-K, free pre-K. Things like that, right? And it wouldn't care. Or what are the Democrats doing? What are the Republicans doing? What do the people want? That's what matters.
Over the last decade plus, if not considerably longer, and the way folks talk about one another, it's clearly a diminished level of interest in possibly working together. So when you say what you just said, how could anybody possibly believe that is possible to happen, that people are going to work together to get what's done in the best interest of the American people?
So before he says, what you would do is, like I said, you just do what the best interest of the American people, right? You bring up a bill for universal health care, and you make it open. You see who votes yes and who votes no. Then in the midterms, the people who voted no, vote them out if you want universal health care. If you want corporate health care, then you vote the people who voted yes out. You let the people decide. But you make votes on these things, or you can even just put it up to the people. Start doing single issue voting, right? Let the people vote on universal health care, minimum wage, schooling, all that different stuff. Or do it in the House and in the Senate, and show who votes yes or no, and then the people can vote them in or out. Big Hakeem energy Jeffries here. Let's see his answer. He is so boring. He's like so not charismatic.
Well, listen, I certainly get that the impression that comes out of Washington, that the clear perception is that everybody's fighting all day, every day, and no one's actually trying to get anything done for the American people. If you take a step back and look at President Biden's track record, certainly during his first couple of years in office before we got into, a more polarizing campaign season, he got a lot done, and many of that he accomplished was actually bipartisan, right? The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, creating millions of good-paying jobs for people
And that got way watered down.
all across the country in blue states and red states, and in purple states. That was actually bipartisan. We were able to get the CHIPS and Science Act done to bring our domestic manufacturing jobs back home to the country, stand up a semiconductor industry so that America is more competitive, so that we can actually make things once again in the United States.
Instead of educating people, we bring them in on the H-1B visa, right? And so we bring the jobs to America, but then bring people from out of America to do the jobs because we don't educate our people. There you go. It works.
States of America. That was bipartisan. We passed gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years. That was bipartisan. And we actually stood up for our veterans.
I don't know about the gun safety legislation. I wonder how safe it is now with our guns. Are there going to be no more school shootings?
Who were dealing with painful exposure to toxic substances, burn pits, Agent Orange. And that was bipartisan as well, strongly led by Democrats in each and every instance. So there's actually bipartisan work that can be done. In the first term of Donald Trump's presidency, I was both an impeachment manager and the lead Democratic sponsor of the First Step Act, the most sweeping criminal justice reform legislation that the Congress has passed in a generation.
Yeah, the First Step Act, Trump letting Joe Biden's people out of jail, or the people that Joe Biden put in jail, Trump letting them out.
And it was supported by Democrats, Republicans, the House, the Senate, the left, the right, the NAACP, and the Koch brothers, and ultimately signed into law by Donald Trump.
So is that your way of saying, since we got so much stuff done across the aisle, Donald Trump's presidency poses a different problem because you're apprehensive that folks on the right will be as willing to work with the Democrats on the other side because Donald Trump is back in office? Is that your way of saying that? No, what I'm saying is...
What happened there? Oh.
This particular presidency does threaten to upend that, because...
That's what I'm saying.
There's so much...
I'm sorry, I hit that. I don't know when I hit that, so you didn't hear what he was saying. Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to go back and check where it ended off, and then I'll finish this interview out later. But, yeah, my bad about that. I think it was only just a few seconds. But just keep coming back to Across the Spectrum.